Another key feature in developmental theory is the notion that early experiences of the self with others, along with their associated affect states, are internalized to produce representations of those interpersonal interactions. Phonology and Target 2003. These internal object relationships are repeated again and again throughout life, and the problematic interactions of a patient described in psychotherapy generally derive from early relationship difficulties encountered as a child. Developments in cognitive neuroscience over the past decade help us articulate how change occurs and what the therapist must do to facilitate change. Although the goals of different therapists with different theoretical orientations may be quite different, almost all of them can be partially understood in terms of altering unconscious associative networks. Gabbard and Weston, 2003. Among these unconscious associative networks are those that trigger problematic defensive strategies, those that trigger problematic interpersonal patterns, and those that underlie problematic emotional reactions. One obvious target of associative change would be the unconscious connection between a feeling state and an object representation. For example, someone may fear that authority figures will always be angry and retaliatory. A second type of associative network involves unconscious wishes that others will behave in a certain way. A third type is unconscious pathogenic beliefs that control what the patient does. A patient might, for example, believe that if she allows herself to express anger, there will be no one left to love her. Yet another target of associative change involves the style of defenses one uses to regulate emotional states. Whether the goal is to alter unconscious fantasies, defenses, pathogenic beliefs, or problematic links between feelings and object representations, the change in the functioning of associative networks generally involves specific processes. Gabbard and Weston, 2003. The first is a weakening of links between nodes of a network that have been activated together for years or decades, and a general lowering of their level of chronic activation. Representations are not things stored in memory, but are connections among mental units, ideas, memories, sensations, and affects that fire together. Representations can be viewed as potentials for reactivation, that is, patterns of neural firing that occur under certain conditions on the basis of their prior levels of activation. A representation of self or an object plays a powerful and recurrent role in a patient's inner life. It is a potential that has been activated many times before and exists in a heightened state of potential. Thus, associative change means weakening links between mental processes that have become associatively linked. The second process involves structural changes in associative networks that create new associative linkages, or the strengthening of links that were previously weak. Hence, a treatment that results in structural change does not obliterate or completely replace old networks. Rather, lasting change requires a relative deactivation of problematic links in activated networks and increased activation of new, more adaptive connections, so the patient will find new, more adaptive solutions. A patient may begin therapy with a conviction that the therapist, a much older man, is bored and uninterested in what the patient has to say. In time, the patient might recognize that he is assuming that his therapist has these qualities because his father, the template for all authority figures, always acted bored and disinterested when he tried to engage him in conversation. This is an associative network that is powerfully active in the patient's everyday life. Over time, the therapist's steadfast interest, concern, and persistence in wanting to help the patient lead to a relative deactivation of the old network while strengthening the new network in which older male authority figures are regarded as interested in the patient. For many years, psychoanalysts and psychoanalytic therapists assumed that the most significant interventions were those that target the deepest processes, meaning the most deeply unconscious. Wachtel, 1997. To some degree, this line of reasoning makes sense because clinical experience often suggests that focusing only on conscious thoughts or feelings produces rather short-lived changes. Implicit processes are psychologically and neurologically distinct from explicit ones, and targeting only conscious processes is likely to leave many significant associative networks untouched. Glenn Gabbard, 2017.